I know my sound has been kind of crappy the last couple of videos. I'm trying to jerry rig a few things, but anyway, hopefully this is a little better. But okay, I wanted to. My sister sent me a. My sister sent me a link to Jacob Hansen, and he has a YouTube channel called Thoughtful Faith. Many of you subscribe to him, I'm sure. I talked about this before, but there's this community of LDS YouTubers that all kind of stick together, and their narratives and their views will be almost identical. He's in that. I'm not saying this in a derogatory way, just in a factual way. Greg with Quick Media would be in there. Ward Radio, and there are others that would fit into that category, and they all they'll appear on each other's show. Hannah Stoddard would be considered in that group as well, although slightly different, but a guest on all those, and they would agree with pretty much everything that she has to say. So Jacob Hansen, and what I keep forgetting the name of it, Thoughtful Faith, his YouTube channel, he did a video on the Netflix series American Primeval. I loved it. I thought it was a great series. It's very graphic. It's hard to watch, but it's a time period that I love. I had a passion for the mountain men and that era. So we the mountain man era really started with the Lewis and Clark expedition. And then from that, you have John Coulter that was on that expedition. And then he subsequently never really came back to civilization. He met some explorers on their way out west, and he said, I don't want to come back. I'll take you there, And so this is where we get Coulter Bay up in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. He was probably the first white man. You're not supposed to say all those terms are derogatory now, but he was the first Caucasian to really document, if you will, it was all verbal. He didn't write anything down, but he experienced Yellowstone and told others about it. They thought he was nuts, the geysers and the hot pots and all the things that thousands of us, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands go see every year to see the wonders of Yellowstone. Well, he witnessed that. And so he explored that area on not his first initial, but subsequent journeys back there. Well, from that came the fur trade with the Henry Ashley group, and Jim Bridger was a young boy on that. You had Hugh Glass and that great story of the grizzly bear attack, and Jim Bridger, a young boy, but with someone who left him, right? Can't recall the name of the guy that left him, but I used to know this way better, but my studies have have led me to other things that are probably more important. But as a young person, I loved this kind of stuff. But I remembered mountain men like Joe Meek and Hugh, of course, Jim Bridger, the Sublette brothers, Jim Beckworth, Kit Carson. Even he came a little bit later, but he was part of that. Osborne Russell, Journal of a Trapper, great book. Oh boy, I know I'm leaving out some very significant ones, but as I watched this series, American Primeval, and it had depicted Fort Bridger, which really came after the fur trade was over, and so you had these kind of displaced old mountain men trying to figure out how to make a living with their expertise and guiding. So in that film, the mom and her son, they were hoping to be led to, I can't remember the name of the place that they were trying to find her husband. But it was Jim Beckworth that was supposed to lead them. He was actually, I know this phrase probably isn't very appropriate, but mulatto is how they referred to him. So he was half black, half white. I think he could have even had some Indian in him, but that's what they said of Jim Beckworth. He was awesome. He was awesome. Oh gosh, I just about had the other guy's name that I think I have some books on. There's just some really good stories and books written, biographies of these mountain men. But this part depicted in American Primeval came after the fur trade was basically done. And so you had these displaced guys that were guides. So the depiction of Fort Bridger, and some of you have been there, Sue and I have gone to the rendezvous a couple of times there, that they have over Labor Day weekend. I love Fort Bridger. I love the area. I love Mountain View. All that area of Wyoming is some of my favorite areas to go to. And the depiction of the Fort Bridger was awesome. I thought it's almost like if I don't have the best imagination, but that's how I would depict old Fort Bridger and the mud and the guys and rough and tumble and all these kind of things. Well, Jacob. Okay, so I get off on things, and I shouldn't spend so much time on it. But I love this, and I love this series. There's language and violence that's pretty intense. So not for the faint of heart that way. But historically, I found it pretty accurate, and especially with the Mountain Meadow Massacre. Now, what it did, and the guy's name, Peter Berg, very good director. He did, if you ever saw Lone Survivor, right? Great film. A great film on a SEAL team that got pinned down. And, Mark Wahlberg is the actor. And, I can't remember the SEAL's name. I used to know this stuff. I'm sorry. But he directed that. It's great. And he does a lot of research. He buries himself into it. And he did one on the opioid. I think it's called Painkiller. On the family that produced Oxycontin. I haven't seen it, but I hear it's really good, and I want to see that. And he's done other things, but this one. So the criticism from Jacob Hansen on Thoughtful Faith is that it just was totally inaccurate, didn't depict anything right with the Mountain Meadow Massacre and Brigham Young and the Saints, and it's just a smear job. And then he quotes, Jacob Hansen quotes and has a little clip of a quote from Leonard Arrington, church historian. I know a lot about him, or a fair amount. He's let's just say he has had and still has an influence on church history as he saw it. Okay, and this isn't about him, but of all people to quote on the Mountain Meadow Massacre, Jacob Hansen chose to quote Leonard Arrington. Now, he has since put a little blurb on his video that's like, oh, I understand now that there's some maybe better sources, right? Some better sources. So, but he doesn't say what was wrong or what was the difference. And so basically Arrington stated that the Mountain Meadow Massacre was more of a Indian, I'll just say Indian, Native American recruiting a few Mormons, but it was really an Indian attack, right, on the settlers from Arkansas. And in all reality, that is not true, not true. And we have, Arrington's version is way more favorable towards things to do with the church. Now, just to back up a little bit, there probably wasn't a ton of the part that wasn't factual was tying in Fort Bridger with the Mountain Meadow Massacre. That it, just was like outside of Fort Bridger and things like that. So Fort Bridger's outside of Evanston, a ways, and the Mountain Meadow Massacre is up in the mountains above Cedar City, in that area. And so, quite a distance away. But this group came through Salt Lake, so they probably did go through Fort Bridger and on their way down on their way to California. So, so there's there's an essay on the church website, and I think it's Turley that writes this. Now, look. You've heard me critical of some of the things on the church essays, particularly on polygamy and some other things. So I don't just believe everything that the church website says. But Peter Berg, the director of American Primeval, he went to the church, got a church historian, spent time with him, actually drove with him down to the site of the Mountain Meadow Massacre and got things downloaded to him. So he did his homework from the church. Okay. So to be critical of him. Now, look, I get it. I didn't agree with everything and all that, but if you just take the Mountain Meadow Massacre, I'm going to read, I don't know if I'll have time to read all of this, but this is on the church website. So here's what you do. You go to Google, and you type in Mountain Meadow Massacre LDS. And it might be the first or second one that will pop up. It'll say the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Click on that link and it'll give you this. It'll go right to this. So here's what it says. Mountain Meadow Massacre. In September 1857, a branch of territorial militia in southern Utah, composed entirely of Latter-day Saints, along with some American Indians, they recruited. So they're doing this, entirely Latter-day Saints, laid siege to a wagon train of immigrants traveling from Arkansas to California. The militiamen carried out a deliberate massacre, killing 120 men, women, and children in a valley known as Mountain Meadow. Only 17 small children, those believed to be too young to be able to tell what happened there, were spared. This event is perhaps the most tragic episode in the history of the church. Now look, this is how this series depicted it. It was absolutely true. Okay. The arrival of the wagon train, I'm quoting again, in Utah Territory occurred in the midst of a period of reformation. So this, and this is depicted in the series as well, a period of reformation within the church. Concerned about spiritual complacency, Brigham Young and other church leaders delivered a series of sermons in which they called the saints to repent and renew their spiritual commitments. At times during the Reformation, Brigham Young, his counselor Jedediah M. Grant, and other leaders preached with fiery rhetoric. Okay, and this was depicted. It's almost like he just took this quote and made a film about it. Warning against, fiery rhetoric, warning against the evils of sin and those who dissented from or opposed the church. Such preaching led to increased strain between the Latter-day Saints and their relative few neighbors in Utah, including federally appointed officials. Okay? This tension, I'm still quoting, intensified in early 1857 when the United States President James Buchanan received reports from some federal officials in Utah alleging the governor Brigham Young and the Latter-day Saints in the territory were rebelling against the authority of the federal government. A strongly worded memorial from the Utah legislature, composed predominantly of Latter-day Saints, to the federal government convinced federal officials the reports were true. President Buchanan decided to replace Brigham Young as governor and in what became known as the Utah War. He sent an army to escort his replacement. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of moving parts. Okay, I'm not going to read all this, blah, 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 blah. You guys can read that on your own. As these events unfolded, Brigham Young declared martial law in the territory and directed missionaries and settlers out in outlying areas to return to Utah and guided preparations to resist the army. Defiant sermons given by President Young and other church leaders, combined with the impending arrival of the army, helped create an environment of fear and suspicion in Utah. So this was, you can totally see how this would happen. And it's so easy from a perspective of living now, looking back and going, oh, those people, what are they thinking? It's like my dad, who passed away a few years ago at the age of 94, and both a World War II and a Korean War vet. He talked about the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And he was actually in Pearl Harbor a year or two, I can't remember, after the attack, and was stationed there in the Navy for a period of time. And the ships were still there, still smoldering, that were sunk in the bay there. It's just incredible. But he was living in central Utah, Fillmore, at the time of the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and fairly close to that is a you can actually see it on a map, but it's a place called Jap Valley, and it's where they took all the Japanese people that lived in, not all, but many. They had different camps, but this was one of them, and they took people from their homes that were Japanese and put them there because they lived in fear. And my dad said, at the time it seemed like the best thing to do. And it seemed logical. We look back on it now and go, what the hell are you guys doing, treating people that way? Well, we can apply the same thing to this, okay? Okay. I'm back to quoting this article. Immigrant families from Arkansas formed a caravan led by Alexander Fancher and John Baker. As the wagon train traveled through Salt Lake, the immigrants clashed verbally with local Latter-day Saints over where they could graze their cattle. Some of the members of the wagon train became frustrated because they had difficulty purchasing much-needed grain and other supplies from local settlers who had been instructed to save their grain as a wartime policy. Aggrieved, some of the immigrants threatened to join incoming troops in fighting against the Saints. So you have this, the Saints are going, we're not selling you anything, and these guys are like, hey, we're just passing through. In the meantime, Brigham Young had told that there should be a fee, a trespassing fee, basically, to go through their property, right? Okay. So all this stuff is going on. Although some saints ignored these threats, other local church leaders and members in Cedar City, Utah, advocated violence. Now listen to this, guys. Isaac C. Haight, a stake president and militia leader. So again, Brigham Young organized the militia. This is a stake president, a couple hundred miles from Salt Lake City, right? Isaac C. Haight, a stake president and militia leader, sent John D. Lee, a militia major, to lead an attack on the immigrant company. When the president reported the plan to his council, so that'd be the stake president, other leaders objected and requested that he call off the attack and instead send an express rider to Brigham Young in Salt Lake City for guidance. But the men Haight had sent to attack the immigrants carried out their plan before they received an order of not to attack. The immigrants fought back and the siege ensued. This lasted for a few days, folks. Over the next few days, events escalated and Latter-day Saint militiamen planned and carried out a massacre. Now listen to this. They lured the immigrants from their circled wagons with a false flag of truce, and aided by Paiute Indians they had recruited, slaughtered them. Between the first attack and the final slaughter, 120 were killed. The express rider returned 2 days after the massacre. He carried a letter from Brigham Young telling local leaders to not meddle with the immigrants and to allow them to pass through southern Utah in peace. The militiamen sought to cover up the crime by placing the entire blame on local Paiutes. And that's where Arrington got his stuff. Anyway, some of whom were also members of the church. Some of the Paiutes were even members. 2 Latter-day Saints were eventually excommunicated from the church and their participation, and a grand jury that included Latter-day Saints indicted 9 men. Only one participant, John D. Lee, was convicted and executed for the crime, which fueled false allegations that the massacre had been ordered by Brigham Young. Anyway, Richard Turley, I think, is the main author on this. And there's others, Ronald W. Walker and Glenn M. Leonard. So interesting stuff here. The church later went down to that site. They put a monument. They found as many descendants as they could of the people that were massacred and did an apology and all that kind of stuff. So there was quite an acknowledgement of what happened. Now, if you take that film, or excuse me, that mini-series, and just take the massacre as it occurred and what they did, this is pretty dang accurate. So you could say, well, Turley and these other historians got it wrong, and the church has it wrong, and that's fine. Because I've done that with other things I've seen on the church website, where I go, well, you know what? Historically and other things I see, I just don't see that it's correct. But I think this is pretty accurate from all the other things I've been able to see over the years. When I read the church website the first time on Mountain Meadow Massacre, was just a couple of weeks ago after we watched, or maybe it was, I don't know, maybe less than that. But it was after we watched American Primeval. I went, yeah, that seems about right, what I remember. And then I read the church thing, and I went, yeah, okay, that's about right. So then when Jacob Hansen comes out and says it's all bogus and it's all wrong and it was Indians that did it, and then he has this kind of disclaimer thing. Well, my guess is he did the video and he quoted Arrington, and he immediately got a call from Jody Stoddard, who's written a book about Arrington. And because they all are part of the same team. So he probably got a call and said, hey, you quoted the wrong guy. So I don't know. I don't know that for sure, but my guess is he found out pretty quick. He was playing in someone else's playground, and he needed to get back into the main playground. In any event, I think Peter Berg did a pretty good job. The weaponry used, the names of people, the wolves and the bear, the Indian Native American attacks and the things like that. Now there's some things there that I would have to double check on. But I think things were pretty dang accurate. Obviously, he had the artistic license, to blend things and, make a story out of it, because it's not. It's real similar to, let's say, what was that film down in the Joseph Smith building that ran forever, Legacy. Is it Legacy? Where kind of the guy that played Joseph Smith wasn't my favorite. I'll just leave it at that. But there was some truth here and there, but and that's fine. It tells a good story, whatever. Well, this is along those same lines. There's obviously some things that aren't perfect and not accurate, but the Mountain Meadow Massacre was pretty dang authentic based on what I just read from the church website. So I thought that this would be just a good quick video to kind of explain that. I just have to say, yesterday was Monday, Inauguration Day. I tell you, it was awesome. Everything about it. Everything from Carrie Underwood just plowing through a cappella and plowing through that beautiful song she sang. The parade, the dances, the swearing in, the executive signing, the people invited. I thought it was brilliant that he had all those tech guys, billionaires, they're just lined up, Oh man. And just Trump's speech was so awesome. I mean, if anybody can trigger anybody, it's Trump. So the Gulf of America, I loved that. I thought that was so great. And drill, baby, drill. That's an oldie but a goodie. Immediately shut down the border. I love that. Okay, so having said that, I took a little break from the TV and everything yesterday. I thought, you know what? My car's filthy. I'm going to go down and wash the car. So this was probably 2 p.m. So a couple hours after, I guess our time it was 10 o'clock he was sworn in. So sometime after that, 1 or 2. So I don't have Sirius radio or anything in my car, and I turn it on KSL. Now, for those of you that don't know, in Utah, KSL is owned by the church through Bonneville International, I think, or Bonneville, whatever, communications maybe, but the church owns it, okay? These are the things that really bug me. They own Deseret Book, they own BYU, and they own these places. And Greg Madsen Quick and all these guys, they'll criticize Deseret Book and BYU and all those professors and all of the things going on down there, but they never equate it with the ownership of the church. And this is it just blows my mind. But yesterday, because I've maintained this, and this is no attack on the Quorum of the 12 or the presidency of the first presidency of the church, but there has been an allowance and an infiltration of left-leaning people in high places in the church, as well as the paid and administrative paid people that work for the church, and a lot of mid-management leadership in the church. And they have a huge influence on bringing in this left leaning thing and this hatred for Trump. Well, they're on KSL, probably at 1 p.m, they had these 2 guys that have a show. And the first thing out of his mouth was, well, I wouldn't even watched the inauguration speech if I wasn't doing this show, because I can't stand Trump. That's how they started their show. These are KSL employees, employed technically by the church, and just spewing their disdain for President Trump and everything about him. Oh yeah, there's only 2 sexes. I love that. And getting men out of women's sports. I love that. Biological men out of women's sports. I love that. I love the clarity. I love that the whole thing was just awesome. So here's my issue. I think when we see these things, we call it out. Otherwise, quite often the brethren don't know what's going on with that kind of thing. You think these things can't happen, but they do. They really do. And so the more we voice it and go, hey, Why is this being allowed down at BYU? Why is this book, a Deseret book? It's horrible. You know, it's promoting the alphabet community, which is horrible. Every one of those letters represent a perversion. And so, you know, what are you doing? And, you know, we need to see that there's a correlation between the church and these entities that are owned by the church that are spewing this stuff. Because a lot of people, they'll listen to KSL and go, well, I guess that's what the church is promoting, and it's a hatred of President Trump. It's a hatred of securing our borders. It's a hatred of only having two genders. It's a hatred of not having DEI anymore. That was another one. No more DEI. It's based on merit. Your job is based on merit. I love that. And the firing of different people, it's all good. Okay, I've gone on longer than I wanted to on this. I hope this gives you a little different perspective. Again, American Primeval, I thought it was great. I know it's rough. I know there's language that can be offensive. And, there's some brutal scenes. But historically, from all the books I've read of that time period, I thought it was pretty darn accurate. Well, that's it for this video. God bless. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.